Yes, let's give Ram Madhav ji a very warm round of applause. All of you all may already know of him, but just briefly to say, he occupied one of the most powerful posts, which is the National General Secretary to the BJP, where he influenced events far beyond, which we'll talk some of that, and now currently the ideologue for the RSS, part of the National Executive as well, I would gather, on this one. So welcome Ram Madhav ji to the India Japan Conclave. And let's begin. We had the ambassador speak just before us, and he looked at an expansive relationship that India and Japan could have. But there is a general perception that even when it comes to economic issues, our two-way trade and the limitations of that, as well as our strategic issues, we haven't really lived to the full potential. Where do we need to give the boost to India-Japan relations? Where are the issues that you think we need to tackle, quite frankly?
See, we started our diplomatic relations way back in 1952, as we all know. We completed 70 years last year. But honestly speaking, the real potential, the real effort to build on the existing potential started only in year 2000. I remember when Vajpayee ji was the Prime Minister, the then Prime Minister of Japan, Prime Minister Mori, he visited India. This was after the nuclear tests. We all know that at the time of the nuclear tests, there were severe sanctions imposed by Japan on India, to the extent that even developmental or humanitarian assistance also was stopped. I mean, Japan went to that extent because of its ideological commitment against nuclearization. But then in 2000, Prime Minister Mori took a very pragmatic view, came to India, and that is when we actually decided that no, we can really
do business.
Have huge potential which can be exploited. Then came Shinzo Abe's leadership in 2006 onwards, which lasted for almost more than a decade in that country, and that was the best period for our relations, which then started growing. And today, of course, we are sorry that we miss Prime Minister Abe, but the present Prime Minister Kishida and our Prime Minister, his efforts, Prime Minister Modi's first overseas visit, if you exclude neighborhood, was to Japan.
Right.
We knew that here is the country which will be our most important partner in our future development journey, strategic journey, and everything. And Prime Minister called it a very natural partnership. The phrase used was India-Japan partnership as natural partnership. I would say that in the last 20 years, we are trying to live up to that. We are trying to work on more and more areas. Of course, Japanese have so many commitments. It's a country of 70, 80 million, million people, but their relationship with US, a big relationship. They have strong ties with China. And we also fit in. We are the, I think, 17th and 18th trade partner even today.
Correct, yes.
So it has to grow, yes. A lot of potential is there.
But let's take geopolitics and the fact that we are part of the so-called Asian giants, the Asian triangle. And of course, we've seen the rise of China and an aggressive China. How do you see India-Japan balance? Diplomatically, they will not use the word contain, but let's say China is a common threat to us. How do we see that, particularly in the Indo-Pacific context? How can we work together? Are we working enough? And what more do we need to do?
So, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe also had this view about the entire Asia to be benefited by our relationship, just as we always had that view. Between India and Japan, we are two countries which can bring in what is called in strategic parlance as the strategic balance in the region. Otherwise, it's a hugely imbalanced region with big countries like China throwing their weight around. And the countries in the region like the ASEAN group of nations or India's neighborhood, here there is a huge imbalance that is existing. Hitherto, that imbalance is sought to be managed by the USA. And in fact, it's very interesting. The first 5 decades after the Second World War were the time when the US tried to dominate Asian politics. Because that time the Cold War was between USA and USSR. China was, after 70s, a friend of USA. So US tried to build strong presence in Asia so that the balancing factor will be US here. That is when it built strong ties with countries like, those days we used to call them Asian tigers in 80s and 90s. And of course with Japan, right from 1950s onwards, they built strong ties. In fact, I remember in 1998, Mr. Schulz was the Secretary of State for Clinton. He made an extensive visit to the whole region. He went to country after country and said, I am here to play the role of a balancing power. That situation has changed after 2000. The rise of China has suddenly offset that whole effort of the US. Today we see China definitely having a upper hand in this region. So in that, India and Japan together should play a more balancing role. And when I say balancing, we are not talking about any conflict. We are not talking about any war in South China Sea or whatever. We are talking about managing an open, free, and inclusive Indo-Pacific region. In that, we two countries have greater commitment. We have to work together. That will bring greater balance in the region.
Primarily, India is a member of Quad. India and Japan both are the member of Quad. How do you see the cooperation to control the Indo-Pacific, basically, the region which has been dominated by China, the way China is growing?
So yes, so it's a very important partnership in the region. Today, we are living in an era of minilaterals. The era of multilateralism is over now.
Good point.
The United Nations deciding things or World Bank deciding, that era is gone. We are in the era of minilaterals. In each region, these minilaterals will decide the future of the region, by extension, the whole world. You talked about Quad. Quad was the brainchild of Shinzo Abe in 2006. It took time. It did not succeed immediately. It finally took its shape that we see today in 2017.
And we were reluctant partners at that time.
Yeah, of course, we continue to be. But we are there today as an important partner in Quad. Quad has 4 people, out of which we are 2 Asian powers. India and Japan are Asian powers. The other 2, US and Australia, are important powers, but not Asian powers, not the regional powers. They are outside the region, but playing an important role in the region. So as important partners in the region, we share certain very strong views about Quad and its future. As I said, FOIP, Free and Open Indo-Pacific, is the important commitment of our 2 countries. India adds one more I, FOIIP, Free, Open, and Inclusive Indo-Pacific, we say. We have to define what we mean by inclusive, but we are a romantic.
Not China, certainly, in that inclusive. No, but coming to the point that he had raised, for a while it was thought that Quad would be more powerful than what it is currently is. It's restricted to economic, to a certain amount of health and other issues. Seemed to be diluted when it was supposed to be, in some senses, an Asian NATO, if you would like to call it. Has Quad, do you think that is a wise thing to move towards a kind of a military arrangement? Because at the end of the day, China's aggression is showing up in the South China Sea and other places. How does one contain China, not just in terms of economics, but also military?
Now, Raji, firstly, what is the continuing relevance of NATO itself is questionable after Ukraine. Whether that formulation of post-Second World War formulation of NATO and all is still relevant, or we have moved on, we have to think. So India never subscribed to this idea that Quad will be at any point in time seen as Indo-Pacific NATO. We never subscribed to that. We never subscribed to the idea that NATO will be a military alliance. We always believed that it is a non-militaristic alliance working on many other areas, economic, humanitarian, scientific, technological, people to people, and many such allied areas where we can work together. The countries can work together. But there is an important principle which has relevance to strategic dimension of it, which is, as I said, this region has to be free, region has to be open. There we have a challenge from China. That challenge needs to be tackled jointly by us, but also all the partners in Quad. All Quad partners realize the importance of that. So Quad, in that sense, is an important alliance here. But I must tell you, outside the Quad, there are many alliances in this region also. We are there in Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO. We are there in East Asia Summit, EAS. We are a member there. East Asia Summit has many East Asian countries as members. There, China is also there. We are also. That's why I'm saying, world is today driven by many minilaterals. We should know how to meander through these minilaterals. And as Prime Minister always says, we have to secure our own national interest, but also ensure that global interests are also taken care of.
Want to ask something? Or, well, continuing with the theme that you had said about Indo-Pacific and free, open, inclusive Indo-Pacific. Sounds good, but what are the nuts and bolts that India and Japan can do to make that a reality? Where are we working? What should be the thrust? Otherwise, it sounds, as I said, diplomatically comfortable.
No, post-COVID, the challenge that the entire region faces is essentially, number one, economic. Number two, issues related to climate change, issues related to that. Number three, technology, availability or lack of it. In pure economic terms, the supply chain challenges that we face today. These are the challenges that the entire region faces, and none of them has anything to do with war, with military, or with strategic issues. There we can work together. We are working together. We are jointly working in port building activity in some of the countries. Disaster relief, we are working together. On supply chain resilience, in fact, India and Japan work together on many important issues related to supply chain resilience. We ourselves want a lot of support from Japan in terms of technology transfers and all, whether it is semiconductors or renewable energy area, in all these areas. In fact, I remember earlier this year, the Suzuki company came to Gujarat to start the renewable cells factory. I mean, they laid the foundation stone for that factory in Gujarat as part of the Vibrant Gujarat Summit. So that is the kind of technology that we want to come from Japan. These are some of the areas where our two countries can work together. There is much more potential, huge potential still exists. I think in the coming years we have to work more on these areas.
Are we in some senses chary of mentioning China in this? Some of the big C, we talk around it, but actually if you take a look at what happened with AUKUS, which is the Australia-UK US partnership, nuclear submarines were given there. Somehow we have not got into any, there was some talk of France coming in with India and US coming into this picture. We have kept away from that. What is our strategy in terms of keeping on one side, one foot on the Quad, and the other side we have China on our border, aggressive, has intruded, and holding them back?
Okay, I think, our problem with China on our borders is different from what the challenge that China poses in Indo-Pacific. These are two separate issues. At least as far as India is concerned, we look at them as two different issues. As far as our border problem is concerned, we know how to tackle it. We will tackle it on a purely bilateral basis. But when it comes to tackling that larger issue of keeping Indo-Pacific sea lanes open, peaceful, and ensure that there is no war 1 year from now, 2 years from now, it is in the interest of not just us, but the whole world. Today, any disturbance in South China Sea region, Taiwan Straits region, God forbid, really war takes place, it's going to impact the whole world in a much worse way than what COVID did or what Ukraine war did. Because it's a very important supply, sea route for many, many countries in the entire world. So we have an interest in ensuring that, of course, there is a challenge from China. We need to tackle that challenge, but in a manner that it would not lead to a war there. I'm sure Japan also probably has this as their ultimate vision, because all said and done, Japan-China trade is more than $250 billion.
Right.
And what is Japan-India trade? Honestly speaking, 1/10 of it. We're still, in terms of pure numbers, China is far ahead of us when it comes to bilateral economic trade relations. So nobody wants war. Even we don't want war in that region. If we can avoid war, we can maintain peace, that's the best option. I think in that also our interests converge. We should try and ensure peace, no war, but also we should work on many of these areas.
In the beginning, in the morning, one of the morning sessions, the Japanese ambassador talked about the Japanese participation in the northeastern state. So I'll ask about the strategic purpose. How can the Indo-Japan be part of the northeast and the, including the, I'll ask about the Andaman Nicobar Island also. And even developing a third country in the IUR. How do you see?
No, okay. As far as Northeast is concerned,
and you're an expert. You
no, I'm not.
You
expert,
ran the whole Northeast for a while.
Matter of fact, speaking, we have been having lot of support from JICA, which is a Japanese government-funded agency, which has huge investments in development sector in the northeastern states. Many northeastern states are benefited by JICA projects, and we are very happy about it. I'm sure if there are embassy officials here in this audience, they know they have huge funding available for that. Sometimes we fail to use that funding. I mean, because of our own political reasons and all, we fail to use that funding fully. So on the issue of Northeast development, yes, Japan, India work together, and there is further huge potential. Northeast is a major producer of bamboo. Bamboo can be a strategic export item, and big export item for entire Southeast Asia. We produce a lot of mushrooms in Northeast. It can be a major export item there. So many such things in terms of pure development are possible. But strategic issues are slightly different. In terms of our strategic relationship, yes, sometimes we try to do things together in countries like Sri Lanka, since you talked about third country. In Sri Lanka, in port building, we are trying to work together. In some other countries, we work together as collaborators or directly, indirectly working together. Andamans is a different case. I don't want to get into that. Andamans is strategically a very, very sensitive region for us. So what should be done with Andamans will be decided by the government. We should not be talking about it here, except to mention that, if ever Japan occupied India, it was only Andamans. 1942, correct. The South Andaman Island was taken over by Japanese army. They were there for a few years and then left. But otherwise, Andaman remains a totally different region for us.
If you take the other side, from the economic side, fine, strategic, military, these are issues that we need to get, to certainly enhance. Can we be an alternative to China when it comes to Japan for their supplies in the supply chain? If that is the trend that we can move towards, vice versa, can Japan source from us rather than China? How do you see that aspect of the relations?
China is a very big economy. It has already grown into a major market for many countries, not just Japan, but even for USA. It's a big market. And for China, US is a big market. Same thing with Japan and China. So there is an existing relationship. I don't think we will be able to replace it completely. I mean, countries after all will have their own economic ties. But as far as on a standalone basis, if you look at Japan-India economic ties, severely underexploited.
Right.
Huge potential. But for some reason, we are not able to really get the benefit
Can we get into that? You said hugely under potential. What are the 3 or 4 reasons? I'm sure you've analyzed it. But let us, it'll help, because this is a nuts and bolts conclave now. We've done
see, one is, of course, as far as India is concerned, I can't talk for the Japanese side, but obviously for India's side, I can probably, based on my understanding, I can say that one is the mindset issue. We are very westward bound. We are very happy dealing with the USA, Europe, English-speaking nations. We are more comfortable with dealing with that part. So we go all the way even up to Iceland and do business with them, which is quite far, but that affinity towards the West and especially English-speaking world. And towards the East, we tried through this Look East policy, then we tried to upgrade it to Act East policy, but still, not enough has been done. That eastward hoe, which is needed in the entire policy's thinking, somehow is not happening sufficiently. It has to happen much more. That is very important. Secondly, there is a language barrier. How do we overcome it? For the Japanese also, when they come to India, and for the Indians also, when they work with the Japanese companies. I mentioned to you about Gujarat. You know, when Prime Minister Modi was the Chief Minister of Gujarat, he actually encouraged institutions, universities in Gujarat to start teaching Japanese. So the Gujarati, generally Gujaratis are very enterprising, they also learned the language, Japanese language. So that is how things, trade and other things develop. So that effort also has to happen. For example, China today has more than $107 billion bilateral trade with us. None of us learn the Mandarin. Very little percentage of Indians speak Mandarin. But in China, 35 universities have Hindi teaching classes, Hindi courses. I myself addressed a group of 400 students in Beijing University who are all students of Hindi. Learning Hindi and try and exploit Indian market, because it is a market. So language also plays a role. On some of these areas, probably we have to work. And on Japanese side, I can only say that Japan has to be a little more liberal with sharing its technology with India, not just trade.
Yeah.
Technology, India.
Please elaborate a little bit on that. Which areas?
Our good friends, in semiconductor area, renewables area, in technology, they have made huge advances. That technology transfer can benefit India and it benefits Japan also. It works both ways. So in some of those areas, we can work more closely. They can take more of our Indian students into their technological institutions so that our students can get benefited from their technological advances. Without any malice, I must tell, whatever Japan is today is because of 1950s and 60s and 70s when Japanese students went to USA, studied in American universities, learned all the technological advances that the USA has made, brought it back to Japan. They had that model in front of them. Today, we should do that. Japan has technology. We should go. In fact, once somebody told me, maybe true, maybe just a story, but in 1990s when George Bush or before him, the president, US president, he went to Japan.
Was it Reagan?
Ronald Reagan went to Japan. He found most of the manuals of the automobile companies in Japanese. So he apparently asked them, why do you publish print only in Japanese? Why not in English also? The company said, see, when you had technology, our students came, learned English, and took technology from you. We have the technology today. If you want it, learn Japanese and take it from us.
Brilliant example.
Maybe it's a national pride. So, but then slowly we also have to learn and probably learn Japanese and go and acquire it. But more encouragement from Japanese side also will definitely help.
Very well put, because if you look at the comparisons, Japan has 4,000 companies over 4,000 companies sitting in India, Japanese entities. We have only 100 companies doing business with Japan, isn't it? That's a very good indicator. You wanted a question?
Yeah, coming back to the defense, that's my topic. How do you see the India-Japan coordination, the cooperation in the defense sector? Do you think it is enough, or do we need to? Where are we right now?
No, see, defense, India's defense needs are growing. We are hugely modernizing our Navy. In fact, it's a big agenda of Prime Minister Modi's government. Had this China standoff not happened, probably would have already achieved a lot of advancement. But nevertheless, we are able to invest on those areas. But in defense, what happens is, wherever you have the technology available, you go there. Today, we are going to USA. USA-India bilateral defense trade is more than 20 billion already, out of the total trade of 100 billion or more. 20 billion is defense trade. Israel's #1 defense partner is India today. We are procuring a lot of defense equipment from Israel also. So where there is a potential with Japan, we will definitely access it. And Japan is such a good friend of India, so there is no difficulty in defense ties and defense partnership. But more than that, we can, there was this reference to Northeast. Northeast has big presence of Japanese. Not necessarily companies, but developmental aid they give in a big way. I mean, I was told by the previous ambassador, Japanese ambassador, that it's 4,000 crores,
yes,
which is a big money for Northeast. They have that kind of support available for the Northeast. But you know, Northeast has very easy access to Chittagong port in Bangladesh. You know, in fact, from our border in Tripura, Chittagong port is less than 100 kilometers. Easily we can access that port. Entire Northeast can be benefited. In Chittagong port area, Japan is building a port today. They have a port contract given by the Bangladeshi government, and Bangladesh and Japan jointly are building that port. India can hugely benefit from that port. So some of those things are also strategically important for us, but also in terms of purely in terms of development, this cooperation can be very helpful.
We almost, I mean, we have time up, but final question, and this comes to your great expertise that you've had in building relations, particularly on the diaspora with US, with Australia. You know, virtually pioneered that whole movement of Prime Minister Modi at that time. How can we do the same with India, Japan? Our diaspora is pretty small as well. We can see, the ambassador was mentioning there are more Nepali students than Indian students over there. What needs to be done on this area?
Oh, one area where probably we need to work more is our people-to-people relationship in terms of our culture, our religion, this area also, besides other areas. Why I'm saying this is, Japan, unknown to many people outside, has a strong cultural religious tradition in their country. We generally call it Buddhism, but it's a different Buddhism. It's not like Buddhism where Buddha is one god. Of course, Buddha is an important god in Buddhism, but Japan has 6, 7 different deities in Buddhism. Most of them are akin to Hindu deities. There is Saraswati. Right. There is Lakshmi, there is Shiva, in Japanese form. So much cultural affinity is there, so much religious affinity is there. There are religious monks, Buddhist monks going from countries like Sri Lanka, other places to Japan and set up their temples and teaching Buddhism there. We have very little contact in terms of Buddhism. We have some contact with countries in Southeast Asia, but very little with countries like Japan. Japan, yes, as a country is a very advanced country, but at the core is a very religious, conservative, culturally very, very sound country. The cultural relationship is one area on which we have to work more, but I would suggest to our Japanese ambassador, our embassy officials here, that they also should work more. It's not just about trade. The people-to-people relationship involving issues like culture, religion, song, and dance, these areas also help in building greater understanding about each other. Why we don't know anything about Japan except Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you ask anybody in India about Japan, they will only know about Hiroshima and Nagasaki, nothing else.
And sushi.
Sushi is nowhere it is available. So that's it. So we can know more about each other in that culture, and religion also plays an important role. We have to work on some of those areas also.
Ram Madhav, thank you very much for this. Let's give him a very warm round of applause for this.